With the help of Hashem, we are learning Taanis Daf Chaf Aleph. My untied class is dedicated in honor of my son Abba and his wife Chana. We left off on Daf Chaf Aleph on the top line. We are going to continue to learn stories about the merit that one needs to make sure that a wall that is unsecured should not collapse, and how, as we learned in the previous daf, that obviously a person should avoid putting oneself in a position where one needs special merits for a miracle to happen to that individual, as we had the expression that sometimes it's minakin loy mizachu yosef, it takes away, or that merit is deducted off the person's account, which we try to avoid. And we're going to learn this in the context of the two great early Amirayim, Ilfa and Abi Yechanan. We're going to learn a little bit about their life. We're going to learn a little bit about how in their merit a wall did not collapse. We're going to learn about the dedication to learning that Rabbi Yechanan had, and ultimately how he and not Ilfa became the Rosh Yeshiva. We will also see, that's something that we learned from Ilfa, that every single halacha that's written in any part of Torah Shebal Peh, in Braises and Toseftas, even if it's not explicitly written in a Mishnah, Ilfa was the one who knew how to find at least that halacha beremes in the Mishnayos. We're going to have on Daf Chaf Aleph the story of Nachum Ish Gamzu, very similar to as we also have his story in Sanhedrin and Daf Kuf Ches. We're going to see how the level of tzidkes of Nachum Ish Gamzu is such that he did not worry about the concept of menaken loy mizachu Yosef. Fakert, he knew that in his merit, things that are going to collapse won't, for his protection, and he lechatchila used himself to make sure that other people's properties are indeed saved. We're going to come back to the Mishnah who gave the definition of what's a devid, what's a epidemic. The Mishnah's ratio was 3 people out of 500 able-bodied men. If these 3 people pass away over 3 days, that's called a devid. And as we will see in our Gemara, that really, that subject to a machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda concerning Bava Kama, concerning how do we establish an ox to be a goring ox, when does a shiur become a muad, and according to Rabbi Meir, even if 3 happens within 2 days or even on the same day, very much like the shiur who becomes a muad only l'Rav Meir, even if the animal was gored 3 times on the same day, that doesn't stop for this animal to become established as a muad, nor, coming back to our topic, that if it's 3 within 3 days or less, according to Rav Meir, that will also be considered a dever, for which we have to enact a public fast day. We're going to learn about Rav Nachman bar Chizda, his interactions, or some of them, with Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, how Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda had tremendous esteem for the Amayra Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. We're going to learn about the power of protection that is afforded when we engage in the mitzvah of tzedakah. We're going to learn about how certain either natural barriers or great distances, if they are not frequently traveled, they do create a barrier for a epidemic or a pandemic. But if you don't have such natural barriers, or even if the distance is great but people continuously travel, then what is happening over there could affect us over here, and therefore we also have to include ourselves in these public fast days. And finally, towards the end of Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, we're going to learn about the great doctor, the doctor called Abba the doctor. He actually specialized in being a blood letter, and that was a common therapeutical practice. He was known as Abba the bloodletter, and we will see that the honors that were afforded to Abba the bloodletter, Dr. Abba, was even greater than Abaya, and even greater than Rava, and a lot more. Without any further ado, Chavra, it's going to be an amazing daf of Sipurei Tzadikim, starting again at the end of the top line of the Amid. The Gemara begins to relate, again in the context of buildings that might collapse, and you need to have a schus for it not to happen. A story beginning with Ilfa and Rabbi Yechanan, that they were chavedim and they learned together, and Havigarsi Boyaraisa, they were learning. However, the Chikaluhu Milsatuva, when their financial situation became very challenging, and Amri, they said to each other, Neikom the Nazel the Navad Iska, let's go and disengage a bit from our dedication to learning in order to free up time to engage in business. And homiletically, they said, "V'nekayim benafshin," we will now fulfill for ourselves. They quoted the pasuk in the A, now in the parsha of the A, regarding whether there will be a time where there'll be no more destitute people, or there's another verse that writes the opposite, that there will always be wealthy and poor, which is a big contradiction, which has to be resolved. But they, homiletically, they darshan that when it says in the A, that the nekayim benafshin, we're going to fulfill with ourselves. Efes kilo yeh b'cha evyon. It's a prediction that at some point in the future there will no longer be poor people. Al pi drush, they understood that to mean, they were applying it to mean, yeah, there won't be poor people because everyone is going to go work. And therefore they felt it appropriate for them to use some of their time in the pursuit of a livelihood. And as they were going together, Ozli, Oisvei, Tusei, Gudariya, they happened to, as they're going towards their new business venture, they happened to sit near a wall. Unbeknownst to them, that wall was not built properly. And by the laws of nature, that wall was going to collapse. And not knowing that, they put themselves in danger. Now, because of their merit, the wall should not collapse on them, even if it's going to deduct off their merits in the world to come, but still, they had enough schusim for them to be protected. Says the Gemara, while they were eating bread there, and the word is they were unaware of the danger. Also, today, Malachi Yasharas, the two ministering angels. Says the Marsha, this refers to the two ministering angels that we just learned above in Taanis, that always accompany a person. And they began to have a conversation with each other. Interestingly, Rabbi Yechanan heard their conversation and Ilfa did not. So says the Gemara, Shamei Rabbi Yechanan overheard the Amar Chad Lechavre, that one Malach was saying to his colleague, Nishti Alayu Haiguda Oy Gewalt, let us push the wall down on Rabbi Yechanan and Ilfa, and V'niktelinu, and let us kill them. Why? They were great tzaddikim. Dafke because they were great tzaddikim. And as we learned so many times, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu medagdek by tzaddikim, kechut ha'sa'ara, shemanichim chaye olam haba, that they let go of their exclusive Torah pursuit because they were destitute. And they chose that they're going to temporarily, they're going to occupy themselves with financial needs, with material needs. So for them, the malachim, one malach found for that to be a kitrug, a reason for us to judge them harshly. That's the pasuk in Tehillim, where we learn that those who are closer to God are judged to a higher standard. So Amalei Idach, so other malach responded, no, you can't do that, Shavkino, let them live. Why? Because the Ika Buhu Chad, because one of these two, the Kaimu Leishata, I know that his time is yet to come, not the time of passing, that there was some mission that one of these two had, and the mission was to become the Rosh Yeshiva, and he wasn't yet the Rosh Yeshiva there. Oh, now he didn't say, the Malach didn't say which one of these two were destined to become the head of the academy. So what happened is, Rabbi Yechanan overheard the back and forth. Ilfa didn't hear. And Amalei, Rabbi Yechanan Ilfa, Shamar, Mar, Midei, did you just hear what I heard? So Ilfa said, no. So Amar said Rabbi Yechanan, whether he said it to himself, whether he said it to Ilfa, that me, the Shamoi, ano, since I heard that conversation, and Ilfa did not hear it, and the Malach predicted that one of us will become, are destined to become the head of the academy, that prediction was about me, that's why I overheard it, and therefore, to become the head of the academy, here, even if it means remaining destitute, you have to not waste a second of learning. So Amar lay Rabbi Yechanan. So Rabbi Yechanan told Ilfa that Ahadar means let us return, or I will return. Even if he was only speaking about himself, he was really trying to inspire Ilfa to do the same. We learned a pasuk where there's a prediction that there won't be any more poor people amongst you, which was then meant to understand that we have to work to make sure we're not poor. So Rabbi Yechanan quoted another pasuk in that same parsha, where it says, there will never stop to be poor people in the land. Really, that's a contradiction, but we'll speak about that another time. Point here is that Rabbi Yechanan decided to go back to his learning. Rabbi Yechanan Hadar and Ilfa loy Hadar. During that period of time, the Gemara doesn't say how long was that. Ilfa was engaged in business. No one should think that Ilfa stopped learning, but not on the same quantitative level of Rabbi Yechanan. Ad Asa Ilfa. By the time Ilfa had enough of a success where he felt now fully back to learning, by that time, Malach Rabbi Yechanan, whoever was the Rosh Yeshiva prior had passed on, and Rabbi Yechanan was then the greatest amongst the Talmidim, and he became the king, which means he became the head of the academy. However, when Ilfa finally returned, Amrullah, the Chevra told Ilfa, had you been here, we would have chosen you. Asiv mar v'godes, had you stayed here to continuously learn, loy hava malach mar. We wouldn't have made the other master or the current master. We would not have made Rabbi Yechanan the Rosh Yeshiva. But now that you did not learn quantitatively like Rabbi Yechanan, now lo shayach, or it's too late. Now Ilfa felt that the Chevra felt that indeed by now Rabbi Yechanan, so to say, learned a lot more than him, and perhaps he knows less, or he perhaps forgot some of his learning. And Ilfa wanted to show, and this is a big lesson for us, who Baruch Hashem have a livelihood, that the pursuit of Parnasa doesn't mean that we will have a diminished amount of Torah knowledge. Now there are always those few individuals like Rabbi Yechanan, the concept of Teirasai Umanasai, that they have to learn 24/7. But the subsequent story is going to point out that Ilfa felt that not only did he not lose anything because of his engagement to make a parnasa, which is a mitzvah, but adarabba, the way you have Nachla Nusach in the Yerushalmi, there's Toirasai miskayemes, which means they don't forget their Torah. You have a concept of Toirasai mizbareches, that there is an increase in their Torah. Ilfa still considered himself to be now more knowledgeable than Rabbi Yechanan. And at least to the point where no one should think that his engagement in business is a downer, is a loss. It's not a loss for his title learning. And how did he demonstrate that? So there's a very interesting way that he did it. Says the Gemara that Azal Tola Nafshe Be'askoria Desfinta. Ilfa, he went to the mast of the ship, and standing on that demanded a tremendous amount of balance. And perhaps that's what he really meant to say, that even when we are engaged in business pursuits and earning a livelihood, it's still a balance. And when we get it right, we're great. Now there's a danger. There's a danger that if you lose your balance, since the mast is very high up, a person can not only fall, but they can, God forbid, drown. And Amar and Ilfa said that ikadashol li masnisa. Anyone can ask of me any halacha that's only found in the Braisas that were compiled by Rab Chia and by Rab Oishia. These were the Talmidim of Rav. After Rav closed the Mishnah, everything of the oral Torah then, which was not written at least explicitly in the Mishnah, they were the ones that wrote the Braisas. And their Braisas are considered the most authentic Braisas. Really, there are other Braisas as well. But this is what Ilfa said, that if anyone can quote anything written in any of the Braisas of Rab Chia and Rab Oishia, V'loi pashtino le mi masnisin, and I will not be able to show them how really this is at least hinted to, alluded to in the Mishnah of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. If you'll catch me by that lack of knowledge, then nafilna ma'askoria desfinta v'tavana, I'm going to fall off the mast and I'll drown. And he was not saying that he was going to commit suicide. He was trying to tell them that when you get the balance right, you don't fall. Not only do you not fall, but the mast is something very high. Maybe Ilfa was trying to allude to the fact that if someone gets this right, they are even higher than people that don't need to find that balance. Bottom line is, he challenged the Chevra. Okay, so someone stood up to the challenge. So Asahu Sava, came along an elder. There's a Tosfos that says whenever Chazal speak about an elder without saying who the elder was, as a klal, it refers to Elyahu HaNavi. Be that as it may, came along an elder. And Tonalein, he quoted the following Braisa. The Braisa writes, if someone says, and says Rashi, Chevra, and Rashi is on both sides of the Amid, but look inside Rashi, on the Rashi side, on the inner side, here on the right side, 8 lines before the bottom of the Amid. What's the context of this Braisa? Misha Meis, someone is passing away, and he appointed a trustee, and he tells the trustee, Tanu shekel, give a shekel. Now Rashi explains a shekel is a half of selah. Give 1 shekel, which means a half a selah, lebanai, to my sons, to my family, lohitza b'shavua, for their expenditures for the week. Turns out that living off a half a selah is very difficult. Normally you would need to have double that amount. You would need to have a selah. Oh, So the Baraisa says that if vehem ru'oyim lasis lahem sela, if really Beis Din understands that the children, the amount of their expenses demands for them double, not a shekel but a sela. So says the Baraisa, noisnim lahem sela, you give them the sela. Hold on, even though he said a shekel, since he did not say the words, don't give them anything other than a shekel. He didn't say that. He said, give them a shekel. We know that a person wants for his children to live. If it's not enough to live, really he meant to give them what they need to live. Why did he mention a lower number? He did not want for them to become spoiled. He did not want for them to view money in a way that like, easy come, easy go. So they should see that, oh my God, we need to have double than the amount that dad said we should get. And that is going to motivate them that sooner rather than later they'll go work. And they're going to have a greater value for money. However, but if he spelled it out in a more explicit way, ve'im amar. But if he says that what? That al titnu lahem, don't give to them anything other than a shekel. Don't give other than a shekel. Here indeed, that's what he said. So that has to be kept. Ein noisn lahem elo shekel. Okay, now another statement that the Baraisa writes that Amar, if a person says that Mesu Yirshu Achedim Tachteim, that if my children pass away, after their passing, the estate should not go to their heirs, but it should go to a third party. Now, we're going to learn many details about this, especially in the last Perek of Bava Basra, but a person has such a power. Prior to one's passing, the person owns their estate. And a person can make such a stipulation. You have to know how to make it be effective halachically, but you can make a stipulation saying that even though the estate will go to his children, after the children's passing, it should go to a third party. When a person says that, he's very careful. You see that he wants that after the children's passing, there should be an estate left to go to a third party. He doesn't want his children to eat all of it up. So in such a case, and if he, on top of that, said that while my children are alive, I want them to get a shekel a week, even if he didn't say don't give them anything other than a shekel, right? Bein Omar Tenu, which is the normal way. And even if he said Al Titnu, only the shekel, in both cases, says the Baraisa, Ein Noistam Lehem Elo Shekel. The Baraisa is really saying that other than the words that a dying man leaves as his instruction, we should estimate, we should intuit what his intentions are. Normally we don't follow intentions, here we do. So from every case we can better figure out his intentions, and we thus interpret his words according to his intentions. So it says in the Braita. Now that's a chiddush. Normally we don't look at intentions. How do we know what one's intentions are? Just do what the person said. So says Ilfa, you want me to find a Mishnah? I'll find it clearly in a Mishnah. Hamani Rav Meiri. And he quoted the Mishnah, Mishnah Ksubis, Daf Samach Tes. It's amazing. Now that Mishnah is speaking about other scenarios, we got to move on, that speak about someone's instructions, in which the Tana Rabbi Meir says that when someone is about to pass away, we don't only look at the words that they say, but we also look at the desire that that person has. And we modify, or we accommodate, or we interpret the words according to the person's desire. The words that Rabbi Meir says is mitzvah lakayim divrei hames. Literally, that means it's a mitzvah to fulfill the words of the one who's passing away. Really, Rav Meir's, the words divrei doesn't mean divrei. Divrei here means the wishes. That means we take his wishes into account. Now, you can argue, how do you know what someone's wishes is? Well, the Chazal had that capacity. And again, they're not going to do the opposite of what the person said, but they're going to modify the person's words according to what we understand this person's wishes are. Bottom line is, even though the case was completely different, but the fact that Rabbeinu HaKadosh quoted in the Mishnah and Rab Meir, that's where Ilfa succeeded in showing the elder that Itaka went to business and many hours Rabbi Yechanan learned more than him, but there was a certain sharpness, there was a certain knowledge that Ilfa had, that he was Taka still superior to everyone else. Now, why was this story brought over here? Again, continuing from last daf. The point is that a person should not put oneself in danger. How Rav Ada did not appreciate that they brought him into the house, counting on the house not collapsing while he is in there. And here again, you see that since they were near the rickety wall, if not for the fact that one angel knew, one malach knew, that one of them, Rabbi Yechanan, was still destined to become the Rosh Hashiva, and that was something that could not have been forgone, then they were taken in danger. So they were saved. But we also learned in the last daf that if someone is saved, that's what the Gemara said. Rav Ada bar Ahava was not happy. Why? Because Shema, that maybe if a miracle will happen, the merits will be deducted. Now, in that context comes the Gemara with the famous story of Nachum Ish Gamzu. Now, the truth is we have this Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Kuf Ches, but it's relevant over here because we will see that Nachum Ish Gamzu was not concerned with Menachem Loi Mezechu Yosef. Why was he not concerned? So obviously we're learning this, we'll try to put on a Hasidic pair of glasses, halavai. It's because he didn't care if they're going to take away his zechusim. If Nachum Ish Gamzu felt that because of him another Jew won't have any financial loss, Nachum felt, good. He will lose his zechusim. How better to spend your zechusim to give something, to do a favor for another yid, even if it's only a material, temporary favor. That was the greatness of Nachum Ish Gamzu. I want to know something else. We spoke this out on Sanhedrin. There is a city near Lud in the times of Chazal that's called Gimzu, and Nachum came from that city. Happens to be that there was another deeper reason why we called him Nachum Ish Gamzu, because Nachum, as we'll see over here, he was accustomed to say Gamzu L'Toiva, as we'll learn our story here. So they said about Nachum Ish Gamzu that that the Rachmana Litzlan, physically he was a terribly afflicted person. He was blind in both of his eyes. Gidem, he was missing Mishtei Yod of both of his hands. Kiteya, he was missing legs, both of his legs. Mishtei Raglov. Not only was, imagine, blind, no hands, no feet, and v'chol gufei malishchin, and his entire body was covered with all types of skin ailments. And there was a time he was once lying in a home that was going to collapse. And this yid, because of the types of ants or other small rodents that used to frequent the homes, as many of them still do today. So if a person has hands and there's a mosquito on your body or there's an ant on your body, you brush it off. Nachum Ish Gamzu did not have hands. So wherever they put him, they would put him on a bed. They would have the legs of the bed in a basin of water to prevent those rodents who would not go into water to be able to get to him. Why? Like we just said, so ants would not be able to crawl on the bed and crawl on his body, and he would be unable to brush them off. Now, again, whether you're good at this or not, so there was such a time where this is the time, or was another time, and people wanted to move him out of the house. They realized that there is a danger of being here, and we don't rely on miracles, nor do we want for this Menachem Mizachu Yosef, and they felt he's in danger. First, let's take him out, and then if the house is still standing, then we'll take out the things, the stuff, the furniture, the gashmias. So Amar Lahem, Nachum Ish Gamzu told his Talmidim, Banai, my children, I'm here. He was confident that when he is in, the house will not collapse. He tells them first, Panu es hakelim, and then only afterwards, V'achakach Panu es mitasi. Like this, my presence will save someone's financial loss. Shemuftach lochem. He says, I guarantee you, that as long as I am in the house, the house will not fall in. And indeed, Pinu Asakelim, they listened to what he said. First they removed anything of value. And then they removed his bed. And as they removed his bed, the Nafal Habayis, the house immediately collapsed. So they saw what a tzaddik. I mean, see, mamash, the house was going to collapse, and he was a tzaddik so many ways because he was not concerned of Menachem Mizachu Yosef, or he didn't care about it. So they were so impressed with his level of tzidkes, they wondered how can such a Jew be in such suffering. So Amru Loi Talmida V'Rebbe V'Chimei Achar Shetzadik Gomurata Lama Also Lochakach. What happened to you? Amar Lahem, to which Nachum Ish Gamzu responded that Banai, my children, Ani Garamti La'atzmi, I took this upon myself. I brought it upon myself. I was once going on a trip, and I was going to visit my father-in-law. And I had with me 3 trunks. There was 3 donkeys laden with foodstuff. One says Nachum telling the story, Achashol Michael, one was of food, Achashol Mishta, one was of drink. And not only that, I had wealth with me. Achashol Minei Migadim, all types of other delicacies were under my possession. And while I was traveling, a poor man came. And he stopped me, V'amarli Rebbe, Parneseni, help me, he begged for food. And Omartile, and I told him, I reacted naturally, normally. I'll go down, I'll bring down the luggage, and I'll give you food. He was going to give, but he didn't run to give it in an extraordinary quick way. And why would he? But that's what happened over here. And this person was in such dire straits that every second counted. Nachum did not hesitate 1 second, but he didn't do it in a very speedy way, because normally you don't work that quick. So he told him, he says, okay, I'm getting down the donkey. But the time he got down the donkey and he brought down the luggage and he brought down the food, and in retrospect, Nachum says, I should have ran to do the mitzvah, and that person maybe would have lived. So I collapsed on that person. And V'amarti, and I said to God, that my eyes, that had no mercy on your eyes, Yisoimu, should become blind. Yodai, my hand, that did not have rachmanas on your hands, Yigademu, should be cut off. Raglai, my feet, that could have worked quicker, that had no rachmanas on your feet, Yiskatu, should be, God forbid, cut off. And after saying all that, I felt that this still won't bring about my atonement. Until I said that Kol Gufi Yehei Malishchin, all of my body should be filled with boils. When they heard the story of Amrullah, they told him, woe is it to us that we see you like this? Amrulahem, oili, woe is it to me, if you would not see me like this. Now the Gemara says, "V'mai karulei Nachum ish gamzu." Again, a pshat, he came from the city, like we mentioned, called Gimzoi. But why did he call him Nachum ish gamzu? The chol milsa, the hava misalikli. Anything that would happen to him, Amar, his response was gamzu l'toiv. This too is good. This too is good. The Rebbe explains the difference between Nachum ish gamzu and the other story we have in Chazal of the great Rabbi Akiva, that habitually would say that Kol Ma Da'avad Rachmana L'Tav of it, that everything that God does is for the good. The Rebbe points out that by the story of Rabbi Akiva, as we'll learn, where his things were eaten up out there in the forest, no one invited him in the house, the candle blew out, those things were not good things, but they saved him from something much worse. They prevented him from staying in the city. There were Ganovim, the bandits that went into the city, and they robbed people and they killed people. So he was not there, and they didn't even notice him in the forest. Now, sleeping in the forest, which was what happened to Rabbi Akiva, is not a good thing. Something not good happened, but it's for the good. Or, wie man sagt, das war dem kapara. Nachum ish gamzu was on a much higher level. He was the Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva. Nachum ish gamzu actually was on the level where what happened itself is good. Not always do I notice it, Seder. But it's not only for the good, but this is good. And now we have the greatest story that brings it out. Zimnachana, one time, there was a certain Roman general whom needed to be bribed, whether there was a decree, whether there was a preventative measure. The Gemara doesn't say over here, but there was a tzara. And they knew that when you go and bribe a Roman official, it can either work or it can backfire. So Amru, they said amongst each other, Man Yezel, who should be the one appointed to go? Yezel Nachum ish gamzu. He should be the one taking the gift, taking the bribe. The Melumed ben Nisanhu. Same lashon we find in other Chazals, right? Me'ilah Daf Yud Zayin, regarding Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. Here it's regarding Nachum ish gamzu. Melumad Benissa means that it's common that miracles happen to him. And a miracle was needed, and Taka, it happened to him. What happened was like this: that Shadru biyadei meloi sifta, the Avanim Tovim Margolis, that they put together, everyone participated how they could, and they put together a ganze chest, filled with precious stones, filled with pearls. And they sent him off to that Caesar, to that Roman representative. So when he went, he overnighted in a certain inn. The people who owned that inn, who owned that hotel, they saw the chest. They suspected there might be a treasure in there, and tragically, at least at that point, they stole it from him. They noticed that Nachum Ish Gamzu was such a spiritual person that if they're going to fill it up even only with dirt, so the weight will be the same, he was a trusting person. He might not even check. And here we have different versions what happened. In other words, if they would just take it out and it would be empty, that would be the end of the story. He would not go on to the Caesar. They were trying to cover up the fact, or he would know that they were the Ganavim, because he got there when it's full and he left when it's empty. They were trying to cover their tracks, so umilunu after they filled it up with dust, with the earth of the, they dug up earth right around that inn. Now, some people have this girsa, some don't have the version. That lamachar ki chazunu amar, when he saw the dirt, he said gamzulu taiva. Some people don't have that version because they hold that if he would have seen the dirt then, he would not be allowed to rely on miracles. Or, again, he was such a level, he was a tzaddik of such a level that he was allowed to rely on miracles. And he went in front of this Kesar. And Kimatu Hassan Sharino Lesifta. So you give the Jewish community sending you a gift. And he had a chest. So they opened up the chest. Chazanu Demalu Afra, they saw that the chest is filled with dirt. And the Caesar became enraged not only against Nachum, against all of the Yidden. Bo Malka Lemiktelinu, not only to him, but Lekulu, to all of the Yidden in his province. And Amar, because he says that the Yidden are making fun of me. They're sending me a gift of dust, of dirt. How did Rav Nachum respond? Amar says, Nachum, Gamzul Toiva, this is good. Elyahu, this is the miracle. Elyahu Navi manifested. But how did he manifest? He appeared to this general, to this Roman representative, like one of his ministers, like a senator. And Amar Lei and Elyahu Navi said that Dilma ha'afra ma'afra d'Avram avu hainu. The Jewish people are not going to call and mock you. Maybe this is the Jewish dirt. And he reminded him that in the Chumash, Parshas Lech Lecha, when the Torah records the war that Avram Avinu had, ultimately through which he saved his nephew Lot. So according to the Midrash, it was Avram and Eliezer against 5 kingdoms, against 4 kingdoms that won over the 5. But how did Avram Avinu win the war? That he told them that the Chihavi Shadi Afra, he reminded him the story that when Avram Avinu would throw dust or dirt against those armies, those enemies, Havi, so like this, the Afra became Saife. The dust became swords. The gilei, which means the straw that Avram Avinu picked up in his hands when he threw it, every granule, have a girei, it became a spear, became an arrow. And that's the way Avram Avinu won the war. And this is the chsiv as he's quoting a pasuk. Now we know this from Lech Lecha, but in Yeshaya it's more explicit. It says in Yeshaya that Yitein ka'afar charbay, that he made a sword like dirt. That's the remes, that every granule of dirt taka became a sword. And kikash nidav kashtoi, and a bow was like a straw blowing in the wind. That means a shtickle straw became mamish like a bow, all right, like an arrow. And indeed, when the Caesar heard that, he says, okay, let's try it out. There was a certain area that this Roman wanted to conquer, and he attempted many times and he was unable. So he took this chest filled with dirt to the battlefront and and they used it and it worked. And the soldiers, the Romans, threw it, and every granule became a weapon. And he conquered that city. Now he's coming back to reward Nachum Ish Gamzu. So the Caesar went into his treasure, into his treasury. And he filled up the chest with precious stones and with pearls. And he sent them off with great honor. Now the Rebbe points out, that's the pshat Gamzu l'toiva. In other words, it's not that something bad happened for a greater good, worth to pay this price to get something greater. No, when they took out the precious stones and they filled it up with miraculous dirt that every granule becomes a weapon, is more valuable than the Avanam Tovim of Argolius. That's the real meaning of Gam Zula Toiva, that what happens is Taka the best. Now the story didn't end. Now Nachum Ish Gamzu is going home. Not only did he live that encounter, but he's going home with honor and with wealth. So Ki Asu Bisu Bahu Diyura, when he came back, he went to stay in that same inn. We have this also in Pasuk in Lech Lecha. The Pasuk says regarding Avram Avinu that when he came back after the story with Parai and his wife Sarah, so it says Vayelech L'Masa'ov, and we learn Chitas. Says Rashi that Avram Avinu stayed in the same hotel that he stayed on the way there. First of all, he owed them money. On the way there, he was poor. But that's Bachlala Derech Eretz, that if you go and you stay in a hotel, if you stay in someone's home, then when you go back to the same place, stay in the same location. If not, people will think that something bad happened to you over there. So anyways, Nachum Ish Gamzu went back to the same place. And Amru Lane, they told him, Hopa, my ISIS Bahadach, you're coming back with the treasure. Why? And the Avdilach Yikara Kulahai, and why are they giving you so much honor? So Amalahu, so Nachum told him that he told him, I know what happened. You stole my things, but the dirt that you gave me was that valuable to the Kesar. He says, my deshakli mahachi, that which I took from here. He was telling them that which you put in my chest. I'm toilo hasam. This is what I brought to Kesar, and obviously it was that great. So what happened was they decided to themselves, no, now they hit the gold mine. They're going to bring all of their dirt now to this Roman general. But not only all of the dirt, they demolished their home, they demolished their inn to have even more afar and dirt to bring, because the more the better. So Sasri Lididayo, they demolished their hotel, and Vamtino Lebemalka, and they brought all of it, all of the rubble they brought over to the Kesar, and Amrulei. And they told this Roman representative that Hi Afra, the ISIS that Jew, he came with one chest. Here we're bringing you wagonfuls of it. Fine. So they were not thrown into the dungeon, but the king tried it out, and it didn't work. But he found it not to work. And now the king, the Roman general, executed all of these innkeepers. How great. Going back to the Mishnah, again speaking about an epidemic. So the Mishnah says, that from 500 able-bodied men, if 3 people, God forbid, die over 3 days. And as we spoke out in the Mishnah, and not less would mean not 2 people over 3 days, not 1 person over 3 days, nor 3 people over 2 days, nor 3 people even on 1 day. You can argue, oh, that's worse. No, it's not. When you want to measure whether we have an epidemic, it's the ratio is 3 of 500 healthy men over 3 days dafka. And now we'll see, really, this is subject to a machlekes tanoim. So first of all, Tana Rabbanan, another detail that we don't see explicitly in the Mishnah. Our Mishnah spoke about 3 from 500. Our Mishnah never said that it's the ratio 3 from 500. Here we have that written so beferish. That Tana Rabbanan, if you have a city that has 1,500 able-bodied men, and the example then was Kfar Akoy. So again, it's the ratio. So if it's 3 from 500, so it's 9 from 1,500. And over 3 days, 9 people, 9 men die. That is how we know we are in a epidemic. However, says the Braisa, imagine. So you can say it's worse, but no. If 9 died on 1 day, but not over 3 days, or 9 people died over 4 days, less than the ratio 3, 500, 1 per day, and here the Braisa now gives another example like the Mishnah. If you have a city that has 500 men like Kfar Amikoi, and now like the Mishnah, and 3 people pass away, big Gimel Yomim Zeh, here again, then that's mamish like the case of the Mishnah. Let's turn over to Daf Chav Aleph Amid Beis. Right, but here again, if it's 3 from 500 who passed away on 1 day, that sounds worse. Yeah, it's worse for that, but it's not called a dever. Or if it's not over 3, it's over 4 days, obviously, or more. Ein zed dever. End of Braisa. Zok the Gemara. Says the Gemara, go back over here for a second. Yeah. That the Roikat, that's the name of a city, was Ir HaMoitzia Chamesh Me'es Ragli Hava. There were living at the time of the story 500 able-bodied men, and tragically and 3 people passed away on the same day. Again, not elderly people, people that were healthy. All of a sudden they passed away. So then we'll see other great Amoraim that lived in that city. At this time, Rav Nachman Bar Rav Chizda was the Rav, and he made a gezerah. Gaza Rav Nachman Bar Rav Chizda Taanisa, as the rule is that when there's a public calamity, a calamity that could affect everyone should get involved in the fast. The problem is, it's not the way we learned in the Brais, it's not the way we learned in the Mishnah. And who challenged him was his chaver, as we'll see how each one respected the other. Amazing. Amalei Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. 1 second, come on. No, you're wrong. It was 3 in one day. Not a Taanis. It's terrible, but it's not a Dever. Responds Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda. No. I am paskening like Rav Meir. Who speaks? Where's Rav Meir? In Bava Kama. So when you have an ox, we're speaking about a domesticated ox who normally does not gore people or things. Indeed, if they did it the first time and the second time, the third time, the Torah tells us that the owner is partially responsible with all the laws that we'll learn in Bava Kama. He's chayv to pay chazik nezek only if the ox, the goring ox, is worth that or more. Migufay. Only if the ox becomes known as a ox that's mu'ad, which means the owner was forewarned. How do you make the ox into a mu'ad? Says Rabbi Yehuda, over 3 days. The ox gored 3 different people or things, 1 per day, then the ox becomes a mu'ad. Rabbi Yehuda says that if the same ox gored 3 people on the same day, it's not yet classified as a shiur hamuad. And Rav Meir disagrees. Rav Meir says that if you become a shiur hamuad over 3 days, for sure in 1 day. Says Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, the Zelbezach over here, Gavaldik, I will follow like Rav Meir. Rav Meir says against Rabbi Yehuda that if Richek Nigechois of Chayev, which is what Rabbi Yehuda agrees to, as long as they are in 3 consecutive days, but they're spread out, only 1 per day. Rav Meir tells Rabbi Yehuda that if the damage was not done back to back, if it's spread out, nevertheless we consider this ox already to be an established goring ox. So then it says Rabbi Meir only, Kirev Nigechois of Lekal. So if it gored on the same day, then certainly this should be considered, and we classified the ox as a goring ox. And the same thing over here. If the calamity happened in a shorter amount of time, then certainly that's considered an epidemic. Now there is a logic to Rabbi Yehuda. There is a logic to the opposite side. The logic to the opposite side will be is that there are certain days, there are certain times, there are certain events that have a one-time terrible effect. But we don't know yet whether it's going to continue. The very fact that it happened 1 a day and then another one on the other day and another one on the other day, chazaka, that according to Rabbi Yehuda that's worse. Anyways, not according to Rav Meir, and therefore Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda, who paskins like Rav Meir in the dinim of shiur hamuad, here also was goyzer on the Taanis, on the people who live in this village of Diroikat. Says the Gemara, and this is just to point out the covet they had to each other, that Amalei Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda, who told to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, and Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda considered Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak the greater than him. He was like the gadol. That leikomad leisa gabon. Why are you living wherever you live? Come live with us. The city of Diroikat was a more chashuv a place, and you are a greater person, so you should live in a greater location. So Amalei, to which Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak responds, no, Tanina, no. Braisa says otherwise. Rabbi Yossi Omer, quoting the Braisa, it's not that since the place is an important place, the place will bestow honor on the resident. It's punkt fakert. It's the resident that bestows honor on his place. So why should I move to your place? Fakert. You're acknowledging that I'm an important person. I should dafka live in an unimportant place to make it also considered an important place. And the Braisa brings, Rabbi Yossi brings 2 precedents that we find. Number 1, Shekei Motzinu Bahar Sinai, that Shekol's man Shashchina Shuruya Olav, The Torah says, and we're going a little bit back and forth. Pasuk now from Parshas Kisisa, that Gam Hatzoin v'Habakar al Yiru el Mulaharahu. Even the animals, even the sheep and the cattle are not allowed to graze on the mountain. For sure, people cannot walk on the mountain because the Shekhinah is there. But in Nistalka Shekhinah Haimenu, once the Shekhinah left, what do we have? And now we're going back to Parshas Yisrael. The Torah says that b'Mesheich HaYovel, after the blast of the shofar, ends. That's a siman that the Shekhinah departed. Then Hema Yalo Bahar, even people can go up on the mountain. In other words, the Shekhinah brings the kavod to Har Sinai. Now, there are times that once the Shekhinah comes to a place, there is a rule that Shekhinah lo yizazim imkoima. Then the place becomes inherently holy. That's not what happened in Har Sinai. But the point is that what brings kavod was the presence of God. Another example, the Chemotzina ba'oil maid in the Midbar. Also, unlike the Beis HaMikdash, where now we say that Kedusha Rishayna regarding the Beis HaMikdash, we paskin, that's the Machlokes Rambam and Ravid, but we're going to say Kitshel L'Shaita v'Kitshel L'Asad Lavi. So now there's a Kedushas HaMikdash on Harabayis with all of the halachis. As we have to be careful not to go up there, certainly not Betuma. But before we entered the Holy Land, then wherever the Mishkan stopped, it did not imbue that place with the Kedushas Makim. While the Mishkan was there, says the Gemara, Shkolz man shahayon natoi, Parshas Nasai, it says, Vishalchu min hamachner kol tzerua, etc. The Cholzav, with all of the strict halachis of entering there, betuma, with the punishments and the kaparis that you need to bring. But the moment hugdola haparoiches, the moment the tent that's surrounding the area was rolled up, we didn't even begin to properly travel, but as we packed up the Mishkan, and that's the point where you roll up the curtains, anyone can enter there. In other words, just pointing that you bring honor to your place and not the other way around. So if the issue is that my locality is not a chashiv locality, so what? It's not about the place, it's about the person. Now again, Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda had big derech eretz to him. So Amalei, so now Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda tells Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Iyachi, I agree with you, but you are greater than me, and therefore your place now is greater than my place, so I will move to you. So Amalei, to which Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak responds that mutav yavai mana ben pras eitzel mana ben mana. Mana is 100 dinars. Pras is 50 dinars. Now, like the way Rashi here, you can see two lines before, and the narrow lines and under the Gemara. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, his father was not given the title Rav. Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda, that's the great Rav Chizda. So what he responded, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak did not say, no, you're greater than me. He says that your father is greater than my father. And therefore it's not appropriate for you to come to me. Even, and that's his lashon, that it's more appropriate for a mana ben pras, mana is 100, shleimus number 100, that's Rav Nachman, pras is Yitzchak, God forbid he's not disrespectful to his father, but in this scenario he wanted to point out that Rav Chizda was greater. That I should be going to the one who is a mana ben mana, which is you. You're Rav Yitzchak ben Rav Chizda, but va'al yavai mana ben mana eitzel mana ben pras. Now, what actually happened, the Gemara doesn't say. I understand the story to mean that he did not move. He didn't want Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda to come to him, nor did he feel it's right for him to give up his place of shlichus, which has the benefit that every place is elevated because each place had a great tzaddik that lived in their midst. Weiter. Says the Gemara that in the city of Surah, we know that Rav was the Rav in Surah. In the city of Surah Hava Devarto, there was an epidemic, there was a dever. However, even though in the larger Surah there was something horrible happening, and without a miracle it would have affected all, nevertheless, Bishvivu Seder Rav, but in the neighborhood where Rav lived, Lo Hava Devarto, there was no such epidemic. And Savru Minei, people thought, well, that's Mishum Zchusi de Rav. The Nafish, Rav has so many zechusim that his merits are protecting his neighborhood. However, what it was shown to everyone in the city, everyone had the common dream that Rav, the Nafish is zechusei tuva. You're right. Rav has tremendous merit. Rav's merit is more than needed to protect the city, but that's not the case. It's even considered something little for Rav. That's the whole sheet of the holy Baal Shem Tov, that when you look at a Yid and he might not appear to be what you consider great, and you might even call him an Ish Pashut, There is nothing greater than an ish pashut. So there were certain people that were not yet fully appreciated, and it was shown from the heavens to the people in the city that there's a person, but not even giving his name. He had a certain mitzvah. He had a certain mitzvah of tzedakah, and that saved the city from death. And what was this tzedakah? The shayil, mara, uzevila. Mara and zevila are two types of shovels that were commonly used when a burial happened. So the Chevre Kadisha did not need to own the burial tools because there was someone that lived there. That was his tzedakah. Whether he was a farmer, whatever reason, he already owned those tools. Whenever someone passed away, it was his mitzvah. People borrowed his utensils for kavura. So there was a dever, an epidemic was killing people. Mida keneged mida. No one died in his merit. His property helped burying the dead. No one now needed to bury the dead. Another story, back to the city of Bideroikat. There was once a delecta, there was a fire. Here again, by the laws of nature, the fire should have spread. However, at that time, Rav Huna was the Rav. So in the neighborhood of Rav Huna, Ubishviv said that Rav Huna have a delecta, and that was a ness. And here again, the townspeople thought that Rav Huna the nafish. His great merit is protecting them, and it was enough. But here again, is Chazaluhu Bechelma, Haizutro Rav Huna. Indeed, this miracle can easily be covered with the merit of Rav Huna. But it wasn't because of him. By the way, the Marsha here writes, Chedusha Agada, is that in both of these stories, going back, aside of the exception of Nachum Ish Gamzu, that Mistame, he was not concerned with the Kotointi, with Menachem Mizuchu Yosef. They wanted people to know that they're not going to deduct the Schusam, not from Rav and not from Rav Huna, because it wasn't because of them. Aside of the pashut, people should know how to better appreciate an ish pashut. And the mitzvahs that are perhaps not seen, should be noticed. That there was a woman there, and she had a mitzvah. What was her mitzvah? The mechamam tanura umishayla l'shvevu say that every Erev Shabbos, Rashi says, she would heat up her oven. Not everyone had an oven. That was her mitzvah. She heated up her oven, she gave the fuel, and everyone in the village, everyone in the shtetl who wanted to bake for Shabbos would have a free use of an oven. That, her using fire eats up a fire. It ate up the natural fire, and no one in the neighborhood got hurt. Says the Gemara Vaiter, Omrule Rav Yehuda. They once notified Amay Rav Yehuda that Asi Kamtzi, that locust came to a certain area. However, and Gazal Tanisa. We learned that in the Mishnah. Even a small amount of locust, but it can affect quickly. It's a simon that many are coming. So he decreed a fast. But they protested, we have to go fast. Amrulay, that in the meanwhile, even though locusts came, loy ka mafsudan. For some reason, the locusts can come to a region, they can settle, but they didn't eat anything. So in other words, we're good. So Amar Lohu, to which Rav Yehuda responded, what Zavda Aiso Bahadai? What, did they come with their own provisions? Did they come with sandwiches? They're not hungry now, but the moment they're going to devour everything, and we need a miracle for that. As we learned in the Mishnah, we cry out to God Almighty. Amrulay Rav Yehuda, a type of miracle for which we cry out. Amrulay Rav Yehuda, another story, that Ikom Moisara B'Chaziri, there was some sort of epidemic amongst the pigs of that region. And here again, Gazar Tanisa. Now, don't forget that we don't deal with pigs. So what was our concern? So Neimad asks the Gemara, does it mean that Kosav Rabbi Yehuda, that Maka Mushlachas Memin Echad, that if one type of animal is afflicted by a plague, does it mean that it's going to spread from one type of animal to the other? So in other words, even though it's now with the pigs, because you are afraid that it might affect the kosher livestock, which is why you're declaring all these fast days. So Rabbi Yehuda said, no, there's something unique about a chazer. Shani Chazire, Sims the Damyon May Ayu Libnei Inchi, their digestive tracts are very similar to human beings. So even though maybe a epidemic that affects one animal type won't jump that quick from this animal to that animal type, but there's so much similarity, interesting, in the digestive tract between a pig and lahavdol, a human being, that here there is a high chance that if something is affecting the pigs, it might affect people. And here, yes, that justified Rabbi Yehuda's decree of a fast. Weiter. Now the Gemara says a story now with one of his Talmidim, Shmuel. Amrulei l'Shmuel, Ikabaysana by Chayzah, that in the city of Chayzah, which is a city in Babel, there's again epidemic, and Gazav Tanisa. Amalei, they tell Shmuel, v'ha merchak. It's far away from us. So Amar, he responded, 1 second. Since lekama avra hacha the pasuk. In other words, there isn't a natural barrier, a river, a body of water that will stop the plague. Since there isn't anything separating, Shmuel was in Arda, from the city of Chayzah, even though it was relatively far away, but once it spreads, it spreads. Now, as we'll see in a moment, that there is a concept of having a great distance of land that is considered the barrier as long as people don't commonly travel from one place to the other. Next story. That there is an epidemic in Eretz Yisrael and Gazar Taanis. We're here in Bavel. So Amr, and he said, explaining himself, that if someone's main mistress is being afflicted, so then the shifcha, so then the maidservant, for sure is in danger. In other words, Eretz Yisrael was created first. Eretz Yisrael is God's land. So he was as justifying, why are we fasting here in Babel? Because in Eretz Yisrael, even though it's far away, but Eretz Yisrael is considered the Gevirta relative to us being only the Shivcha. Now that implies that if not for that reason, he would not decree a fast. Time of the Gevirta v'Shivcha. Ha-Shivcha v'Shivcha, like if it would be in two countries that are not Eretz Yisrael, then he would not make the fast. The problem is that it happened once that they told Shmuel that there is a Moisana in Bei Chayza'ah, and he made a Gezeira, and even though we're saying that they're far away, or who cares that there's no river, but they're far away. Oh, so the Gemara answers, yeah, it's not only that there's no natural barrier, is that people would travel. Shani Hassan, given the Ika Shayarayasa, the Levei, since people continuously go back and forth, that's where you have a problem. In other words, a natural barrier separates one location from the other from a epidemic. A great distance does the same only if people are not commonly traveling. And Eretz Yisrael is different. That anything that is afflicting the Yidden, the community in Eretz Yisrael, is something for which everyone, everywhere should be involved in the prayers and in the fasting. Let's hop another few lines. Says the Gemara. Let's speak about these three greats. We're comparing amazingly the doctor, Abba the doctor, he was a bloodletter, and the two great Amoraim, Abaye and Rava, Abba Umana, Abba the bloodletter, Dr. Abba, Haba Asilei Shlama, Mimisiftu, the Rekia Kol Yom. It says Rashi, Chevre, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid, that every day there would be an announcement greeting Dr. Abba. How are you? And as we learned today, some people hear what's happening in the heavens. Rabbi Yechanan heard the conversation of the angels. Abaya also got a greeting, but not every day. Abaya only kol mala yom de Shabsa, every day prior to Shabbos, means every Friday. And Terava even less. Ularava kol mala de Yom Kippur, every Erev Yom Kippur. And let's go first with Abaya. Abaya knew that he's being greeted once a week. Abaya saw that Dr. Abba is being greeted once a day. And maybe Abaya said to himself, it means that I'm doing something wrong. And as we'll see, Abaya was doing nothing wrong. But the Dr. Abba had more merits because he was a doctor and because of how he was a doctor. Abaya never had that opportunity. But it wasn't because of Abaya's lack, but it was because of something uniquely special about Dr. Abba. So let's go again. So, Abaya felt dejected Mishum da Abba Umana, because he knew that Abba Umana is given more covet in the heavens. Amrulei. Look at the greatness. Abaye maybe didn't even say anything, but he felt pain, so they told him from the heavens, no. That you're doing nothing wrong, but since you're not a doctor, going back to Ilfa, some people, Dafka the Chassidus says that the Baal Esek, when it comes to Hashgacha Pratis, sees more Hashgacha Pratis than the Yoshev oil. And here are certain mitzvahs of tzedakah only he was able to do. What was his uniqueness? Here we go. Many things. Number one, the Chi Hava Ovid Milson, whenever he was doing his job, which was primarily bloodletting, who came to him, men and women, he was very careful in separating the genders. Hava Machis Gavra Lechut and Ashi Lechut. He would keep them separately. In other words, he would prevent from them mingling. Number two, the Islay Lavusha, the Ispe Karnon. He had a garment that had his kalim, his sucking tubes attached to. However, normally, how would one take the blood out? They would have to expose the body of the patient in order to put in their suction cup. However, but this garment that the patient if it was a woman put on, tahavas bezia ki kusilta. It had little slits. It had little openings, exactly enough where you need to put in the needle, but a little opening, but it still kept that person covered. And ki havas asis le ilza, when a woman would come, have a mal bishla, he would have her put on the special garment, which already had all of the sucking horns and all of the sucking cups, it had all of the kalim, but it kept her always in under the conditions in the most modest garb, for him not to look at her. And not only that, that's one thing. So first of all, he was very careful in separating men and women and tznius. Let's chaparayim. And another thing, he had a room that was a private chamber where that is where the doctor was paid. No one paid him in his hand. No one paid his secretary. There was a room. And the shadib pshita v'shakal. In other words, he charged whatever the fee was. You want to pay? Deposit the money in that room. And he gave the number. Now, no one saw whether a person paid or not. So the isla shadibe. If someone was able to afford, he would deposit it there. The lay. But whoever was unable to pay never felt ashamed. He never needed to say, doctor, I can't pay, or let me, I owe you. No, he went into the room and no one knew he didn't pay. The lay loy michsev. What's beautiful here is the Gemara doesn't say anyone taking the money. Maybe when someone is so special, people don't take money from it. And Kihava Isrami Beibtsumim Bedrabanu, when a young Torah scholar came to him, not only Agram and Eli Shakel, not only would he not even charge him, not I'm charging you, but I won't know if you don't pay. I never charged him, but Ubasir the Koi, after the patient would have his blood let, people have to eat, have to re-nourish themselves. Yoiv Le Pshite, Abba, doctor would give that person money. For Amar Le Zilberi Nafshach, we'll stop in the middle of the story, and much more about the Midah of Dr. Abba, and every day they would greet him in the heavens. Not to be in the heavens. From the heavens they would greet him and give him a bracha that he should have a longer life, because we need him over here, and that's a big Gemara and a schus for all of you doctors out there. Wait, it's late. All the doctors out here, that how much we need you here, and we appreciate your work. Los Angeles is blessed with amazing doctors, and I'm sure so in the whole world. And from the heavens they greet you every day, to be continued.